Everyone here in this room know that as of yesterday, it's been announced that more of your money is going down the drain because we now have a Malaysian Antarctica expedition that's being planned. Not next year or 2 years from now, next week, they're all going to Antarctica. What are they going to do there? Research. Right? I'll bet you didn't know kangkong grows well in ice, did you? Ladies and gentlemen, to do the launch officially, it's my great pleasure and honor to call upon somebody who really needs no introduction.
Launch myself.
Please welcome our guest of honor, Ambiga Sreenevasan.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Cynthia, for giving me the honor of, it's a good word, isn't it? Launching C4. I wasn't sure whether I was qualified to do it, but here I am. When I was in Hong Kong 3 or 4 years ago, I remember hearing a speaker there who briefed us on the business environment in Hong Kong. One of his strongest selling points for doing business in Hong Kong was its zero tolerance for corruption policy. What a powerful selling point that was. And I was envious because they had that selling point. It's a selling point we don't have. In a paper presented by the Assistant Director of Operations in the ICAC, one Jeremy Lowe, said this: before 1974, Hong Kong was plagued with corruption. It was endemic within the police and other discipline services. It existed within all departments of the government as well as in commerce and industry. The people of Hong Kong were rightly angered by what they saw: a corrupt society that strangled free enterprise and made a mockery of government and what it stood for. That describes us right now. So what did they do? They set up the ICAC. I think most of you know what the ICAC is. You know how successful it has been. And they have been working, and I think they started seeing change within about 3 years of their setting up. A US-based heritage foundation, according to this writer, rated Hong Kong as the world's freest economy for 13 consecutive years, most recently in 2007. One of the reasons for awarding this honor, I don't know whether it happened after that, one of the reasons for awarding this honor to Hong Kong is that the Heritage Foundation considers Hong Kong virtually free of corruption. Now, that is outstanding, and that is what we should be aspiring to. Ladies and gentlemen, we really, what's happening in Malaysia, what do we have? We are signatories to the treaty. You know, we are, to the anti-corruption treaty, the UN treaty. We have an MACC. We have the Integrity Council. We have various bodies that are set up. We have a minister who's in charge of these affairs, who was formerly from Transparency International. Pity he's not here. Did you invite him? You didn't. You did.
No.
Okay. But the point is, outwardly, we appear to have all the necessary structures. The MACC, it is claimed, is set up the way the ICAC has been set up. Which is partially correct. We have the advisory bodies, etc., that are there. So what's missing? Why are we so low on the corruption index, when in fact, outwardly, it appears as if we have all the necessary structures to get it right? In other words, we appear to have all the hardware. What's missing is a very important piece of software, and that is political will. there is zero, in my respectful opinion, zero political will to really get to the root of corruption in this country. And that's where our problem lies. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we can pick up pointers from other countries like Hong Kong, etc., and we have. We have tried to set up, or it appears as if we have tried to set up structures similar to them. But we missed that very important element. And I'm afraid that's where the problem lies. The problem lies with our leadership. There is absolutely no leadership in relation to corruption, in my view. Now, how do I explain this in simple terms? What I'm trying to say is, when Hong Kong says they have zero tolerance for corruption, they mean it. When we say it, we don't mean it. It's as simple as that. And of course, I am a believer in leadership by example. If you had read the article by Dr. Sreenevasan a couple of days ago, on how particular his father was about the use of public funds, you will know what I mean. Those were the days when our leaders were acutely aware that they were dealing with public funds when they dealt with taxpayers' money and monies that rightfully belonged to the Raya. That is what I am talking about. And in fact, if you look at the papers written about Hong Kong, they talk about the important role the government played. They in fact say that if it wasn't for the government pushing it, the government's determination to clean up, it could never have happened. So that's the vital part that we are missing in Malaysia. And it's a problem. That is the main problem. Now let's be very clear, and I think Cynthia has said it, by all the recent surveys we have seen, Malaysia is a highly corrupt nation. We cannot run away from that. To a point where some of the surveys have shown that Malaysians actually accept as part of their life that they have to bribe to get things done. And that's a terrible state that we're in. When we come to a point where we accept corruption, that's time for C4. Then it's time for C4. So what do we do with this problem? As Cynthia has said, we C4 it. It has to be done. We have no other way. This nation will suffer if we don't take things into our own hands. So C4 is civil society's response to corruption. It is civil society's response to institutions that do not work, that should work, but do not work. Now, we cannot really stand by and watch while the fabric of our beloved nation is torn apart by the scourge of corruption. And make no mistake, there are many who believe corruption is not really my problem. You know, I'm carrying on my daily life, it doesn't affect me. Wrong. It affects you from the minute you wake up. Because when you leave your house, when you get in your car, petrol, when you leave your house, you're talking about MRT, you're talking about contracts, you're talking about things that you have to pay for, toll, etc., etc. It affects every single part of your life. And that is the problem with corruption, and that is why it is difficult to eradicate. Now, of course, we all know about the Auditor General's report. That comes out on a yearly basis, and I don't know what happens with it. I don't know whether people are actually charged. You have a clock, Cynthia mentioned it, the clock, the $100 clock that we paid $3,800 for. That is ridiculous. But we keep hearing this year in, year out. And we still don't see any concrete steps being taken to eradicate these sort of instances of corruption. Now, Patrick talked about millions and billions. Well, actually, Patrick, we've gone to trillions, by the way. I don't even know how many zeros that is. But that's the flight of capital out of the And we cannot afford to sit back and do nothing. And that's why I'm delighted that Cynthia and your group of people whom you mentioned got together and decided to do something about it. You talked about a malaise, a fatigue that appears to have come upon us after the 13th general elections. Yes, there was. There was a little bit of fatigue. But we were entitled to rest for a little while, but no more. That little while is over. We cannot rest. A lot of people assumed that after the 13th general elections, things would change, things would improve, that the government would be miraculously responsible, would be talking about unity and reconciliation. Well, they talked about reconciliation, but they didn't do it. That's what I mean. They say things that they don't mean. But none of that is happening. And in fact, we watch in horror on a daily basis at the way in which our society is being torn apart. Whether it is on racial grounds, religious grounds, it doesn't matter. Or let me say, it's not being torn apart. Actually, there's an attempt to tear it apart. Luckily, Malaysians have more sense. Thank goodness, Malaysians have more sense. Otherwise, they would have been in trouble a long time ago. From the way in which these divisions are created and pursued by the powers that be. Now, I think it is important for civil society to step up to the plate. It has. And I'll tell you why. For example, in Bersih, we set up the People's Tribunal. And we did that because all the allegations of impropriety in the elections were never taken seriously by the Election Commission. They didn't care. And they're still, I think, investigating the indelible ink. There was a report of sorts that came up. But none of the other serious offenses that were mentioned, including corruption. So our institutions failed us. As far as I'm concerned, the institutions failed us in the elections. They failed us post the elections as well, because they had a duty to investigate all the allegations. They didn't. So we decided we would do it ourselves. So we set up our own People's Tribunal, and the proceedings went on. People came and gave evidence. And where does the People's Tribunal get its power from? From the people. It gets its legitimacy from the people. So as far as I'm concerned, if our institutions are going to fail us, civil society needs to step in. That's how I see C4. That's what C4 is doing. Our institutions are failing us on corruption. So we have to step up to the plate. Our institutions fail us on crime. We have to hire people to step in. We have civil society movements that deal with crime. So you see this happening over and over again. Now, MACC. I don't know if there's a representative here. I gather there is a representative here from MACC. Pardon me if I'm forthright. But my own view is MACC has completely failed to address the problem of corruption. They go after the small fish. The big fish, as we have just seen recently, get off the hook completely. Now, one of the things that MACC keeps saying, and we see ministers and leaders and others having lavish lifestyles. But MACC always comes back and says, sorry, we can't do anything about that. There's no report, there's no real, we can't see, under the Act, we don't have the powers to do anything about lavish lifestyles. In Hong Kong, they introduced a provision, and it goes like this. It's called the Special Power of Investigation Against Disproportionate Assets or Lifestyles. And this is the wording. A government officer who possesses assets disproportionate to or maintains a lifestyle incommensurate with his or her salary commits an offense unless he shows that he acquired those assets legitimately. So the onus is on you. If you have those assets and lavish lifestyle, the onus is on you to show you acquired all of that lavishly. And that is a powerful tool and weapon that they have in Hong Kong. And I think MACC should really be looking at legislating that. I actually think MACC already has the power. And this is by Section 7. The functions of the officers of the Commission is to detect and investigate any suspected offences under this Act. Don't you think that's wide enough? Doesn't that sound wide enough to you? For MACC of its own volition to go and investigate. I do not buy their line that they don't have the power to act unless a report is made or unless information is received. So my question is, why does the MACC tie its own hands? Why is it that they don't seem to be taking action against the top brass, as it were? Of course, prosecution powers are not in the hands of the MACC. They are not in the hands of the ICAC, let me tell you that. Their prosecution and investigation are separated as well, and there are good reasons for it. Here they say, oh, we've done our investigation, we can't do anything because the Attorney General refuses to prosecute. So they hide behind that. But really, is that all they can do? What about pursuing asset declarations? Why can't they insist on all political leaders and all people in positions of power to declare their assets? Penang government does it. PSM has been doing it for the longest time. Why can't we have asset declarations? Oh no, they're scared. You know why? Oh, it'll endanger us. Well, it'll only endanger you if you're a billionaire or a millionaire. That already says a lot, okay? The fact that they're reluctant to do that. Instead, they declare their assets to the Prime Minister. That's not enough. So why can't we have that? Why can't we have a robust approach by the MACC? I've also actually talked about amnesty. I won't go into that too much. But they used it in Hong Kong when they wanted to impose stricter laws in relation to corruption. Now, what am I looking for, really? What am I looking for with MACC? To me, it is not good enough to say you don't have the powers. To me, it's not good enough to say it's not your fault. Prosecution is not in my hands. I am looking for an MACC chief who will resign on principle if there is interference with his work. I'm looking for that. I am looking for an MACC chief who says he is prepared to investigate the Prime Minister if he has to. But most importantly of all, I am looking for a Prime Minister who says he is prepared to be investigated and who is prepared to declare his assets. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And with that, I have to say the key words. I have the honor of launching C4. Thank you.